We start wearing Kevlar. They buy armor piercing rounds. And you're wearing a mask. Jumping off rooftops.
The hospital is a long way. Right, Chris?
I wish I could say yes. But it will get better in time. For you. That I promise.
You can call me Joker.
I say it's crazy.
But you can call me
The Riddler.
So what are you? Man or Superman?
I haven't figured it out yet.
Why do we focus? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up. Start giving up on me. Never.
Someplace where a war man waits for mine.
I am Dr. Travis Langley, a professor of psychology, at Superheroologist on Twitter, and the author of Batman in Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night. I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves simply, and pull the microphones close to yourself, because you're going to have to share, and starting with this fine young man here. So just tell us who you are and what you have to do with Bill Finger.
I'm Benjamin Cruz, and I'm the great grandson of Bill Finger.
Hello, my name is Athena Finger, and I am the granddaughter of Bill.
And my name is Lee Merriweather. Honored to be here to be part of this wonderful occasion. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Michael Uslan. I'm the executive producer of all the Batman movies, and except for maybe the legendary Denny O'Neil, I may be the only person left who actually met Bill Finger, and I was privileged to have met Bill Finger twice.
I'm Mark Tyler Nobleman. I'm the guy that gets to sit between Michael and Mark, so that's a huge honor. And I'm also the author of Bill the Boy Wonder, which is the first book ever on Bill Finger.
I'm Mark Evanier. I'm the administrator of the Bill Finger Award, which we'll be presenting at tomorrow night at the Eisner ceremony. I actually met Bill Finger for about 5 minutes, only enough to gush out about him and discuss the New York transit system.
Hi everybody, I'm James Robinson. My late father was Jerry Robinson. Most of you know he worked very closely with Bill Finger and considered him a great friend, and he admired him immensely.
My name is Tom Andre. I'm co-author of the autobiography, Batman and Me, trying to get Bill credit in that book as much as possible, and also published Bill's last interview and created Superman.
This is a celebration of many things Bill did and contributed to the world. He has been gone for 40 years. He died just short of his 60th birthday, broke and relatively unknown, as some people consider that the greatest injustice in the comics industry. This isn't actually the place to have that debate. That's a whole subject in and of itself. And we'll have part of that panel tomorrow, 2:30, Who Created Batman, with some of these same people. What did Bill Finger do? We showed glimpses of what he was involved with. I will ask my panelists, to the point, basically, what was he? What did he do? That's too much. Where do we start? What do you do on Batman? Do that first. Yeah, how about his biographer? Yeah.
Okay, so Bill Finger did this. He was the original writer and co-creator of Batman. He designed the costume. Bob Kane produced a sketch, which some of you, probably many of you, have seen, which looks nothing like the Batman that we know today. And Bill, even though he was the writer, he was very visual, and he overhauled that to become the Batman that we all know. He wrote the first appearance not only of Batman, but also of Commissioner Gordon, Robin, the Joker, the Penguin, the Riddler, Scarecrow. He named Gotham City. He coined the Batmobile, the Batcave. And he was the one who gave Batman the nickname The Dark Knight. And those of you that pay attention to these things, the last two Batman movies did not have the word Batman in the title. Batman is so iconic that even Bill Finger's nickname can market a movie to the entire world. So that's just what he did. A quick glimpse. There's a lot.
Jen, your father actually worked with Bill way back when, and you've been involved in trying to further the cause of helping Bill be known over the course of time. What did you learn from your dad about him? As fairly direct as close as we can get to knowing what happened back then.
Well, I tried to help my dad in his efforts to further recognition.
What did Jerry do, in case there's some person in the room who doesn't know?
You know, I was just his right-hand person sometimes in that effort. But my dad felt that injustice for a long time. He knew what Bill Finger did, which was so much. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
Well, first, in case anybody didn't know, what was it? What did your dad do? Why did he know Bill?
My dad joined the Bill Finger and Bob Kane team very early on. He was a young boy. He was 17 years old and living in New Jersey. Bob Kane came by a resort in New York State and saw my dad's drawings on his white coat, like the college kids wore at the time, and he hired my dad to come join that team that was just creating this new property, and my dad was given a sneak preview of it and said, well, sure, he gave it a whirl, and he decided to switch schools. He adjusted his plan, and he started getting involved at that very early age. Just a couple issues involving Batman had been published, and up to that point. And he felt that a lot of the material was a collaboration. There were ideas being thrown around, and my dad, for all those characters and stories that Bill Finger was the first to write and to conceived of, and my dad was most often the first to draw, well, along with Bob Kane, but in many cases, and it was a collaboration in terms of the art as well. Bob Kane would do some preliminary outlines, pencil. My dad often would ink the pencils, he'd often erase the pencils and redraw the pencils.
And how did they work with Bill? I mean, was Bill personally involved, or was he just sending in scripts? It sounds like it was different there at the very beginning from what we've run into a lot of people we tried to talk to later on. Was Jerry working directly with Bill?
He sometimes did. My dad was in the bullpen, from my understanding, Bob was the one who was off on his own more often than the rest of the team. And so my dad had the opportunity to work directly with Bill quite a bit.
Athena, when we've gone and talked to people like Joe Giella and others who were illustrating a lot of Bill's work, and remember to bring the microphone home.
Yes.
What have we generally found about how well they knew Bill?
Bill was hidden from the world. Not like to tell people too much. He was busy working on his stories and doing research for whatever he was working on. So people didn't really get to see him very much.
What did Joe Giella, possibly the last living Bob Kane Batman Ghost artist, what did he tell us about when he met Bill?
You put me on the spot. What did he say?
He didn't.
He did. No, he didn't actually. He had more stuff to say about Bob, though. Yeah, but no, I mean, he did.
A lot of people have things to say about Bob.
Yeah, a lot of people do, but we won't go there. So, but he did have very nice things to say about Bill and his writing. So that was nice.
Yeah, we run into that with Alan Bellman, who was a Marvel artist, not Marvel back then, in the 1940s, and he illustrated a finger story for Marvel. And I checked with Alan, and he said the stories went straight to Stan, and Alan never met him. And I checked with a number of other artists who never met him. Checked with Stan, and Stan doesn't remember meeting this guy who wrote a couple of stories for him 70 years ago. And so we keep running into a lot of people. So maybe this person will be able to tell us things.
And that also.
And that's the cue. Where he did write an episode of Batman, and we did speak to somebody who worked with him on that. He wrote the Clock King episode of Batman, and his writing partner was
Charles Sinclair, who was actually Bill's best friend for most of his later life. And oh my goodness, I had such a great time meeting with him. He shared some stories and also gave me the one piece of sculpture that Bill did, which I didn't even know it existed. So it was really nice to see it and have it in my home now. I can't wait to see him again.
That is one of the few writing credits where Bill's name appeared on comic book related work during his lifetime. There's a Superman cartoon where his name appeared in the credits, although it's William. They listed him as William on that one. He's listed first. Normally Charles went first, and why did Bill go first on that particular Clock King story?
Oh, I didn't ask that question. Oh no, I remember what he said. Sorry. He said that
You
Bill
can say that,
deserved
tell them the questions I
he felt that Bill deserved the recognition first over him, considering that he was being narrowed in the actual comic book world. He felt that he needed the credit.
Charles said that Bill had been hedging about something, and finally said, "What is it that's on your mind?" Spit it out. I was like, "Well, can I have my name first on this one? You have to come on the year, 1966." He had recently been booted off Batman, which he had written for more than a quarter of a century, and he really wanted to get the attention of the folks at DC by having his name appear on a Batman story first on TV. And the attention mattered to him some, but he didn't fight for it. What kind of guy was Bill? Anybody out here, those of you who know him, or we really just have people who met him, but know people who knew him. What kind of guy was he?
All right, I'm going to jump into this in two ways. First, I got to talk about his writing. I was a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s. I started reading Batman comics in 1956, and I want to just talk about that period between 56 and 64 when the New Look Batman started, 50 years ago, by the way, 50 years ago for the little yellow symbol around the bat. And as a kid growing up in the 50s and 60s, there was no organized comic book fandom until around 63, that it really started to take off, 62. And there was no communication, there were no Comic-Cons until July 1964. That was the first one in New York. This is the 50th anniversary of Comic-Cons, if you did not know that this year. And we did not know the names as we were kids growing up of who these artists and writers were, except on occasion when you would see like a square with the name Bob Kane in it. That was the only time we knew who was what. Even though we were little kids, we figured out there was a good Batman artist, a good Batman Bob Kane, and a not so good Batman Bob Kane. There was a good Superman artist, and there was the other Superman artist, but we didn't know names. So to me, Bill Finger, when I was growing up between the ages of 5 and 11, he was the unknown writer who was writing these amazing, visual, fun Batman stories, which had certain signatures that tipped us off even as kids that this was some special guy, because they usually involved giant props. Whether it was Batman and Robin fighting on the keys of a giant typewriter at some World's Fair, or a giant pencil display, or whatever the hell it might be, that was what Bill Finger brought to this. It was a sense of fun, it was a sense of the visual, and usually had Batman and Robin punning their way through adventures, almost always with the most interesting, grotesque, and visual supervillains. If there was a supervillain in a story, we kind of knew, oh, this was the good Batman writer. And it wasn't until 1964 that I learned the good Batman writer was a guy named Bill Finger. And it happened for me in two ways. I want to say Tuesday afternoon when I was growing up, DC Comics in New York had a tour. And if you went on that tour, I quickly learned at the end of the tour, they gave away this thing called original art. And they would take all the art, going back to the 1940s, and at the end of the tour, the production manager stood there on a big paper cutter and would cut it into 3 different sections and hand it out to every kid on the tour. So I learned to become the most annoying fan ever on the tour, until just to shut me up, they gave me full pages. And then they would give us drawings of Batman and Superman, and we would have an opportunity to walk around the bullpen, meet the artists and writers, and ask for autographs. So I go into the bullpen, and sitting across from wonderful artist Murphy Anderson is a guy, a slim guy, quiet guy, and he was working on a typewriter there, and I just came over and just started watching him, and I think I unnerved him. I did not think he was used to having anyone, never mind a 13-year-old kid looking over his shoulder. And I told him I wanted to be a comic book writer. My dream was to one day write Batman comics. And then he informed me that not only was he writing, I forget what he said, Black Hawk, or a lot of the mystery stories like Unexpected, but that he was the original writer of Batman. Never said anything about creating it. He was very, very much a man of humility. And he just said, I've been writing Batman comics for a long time, actually since the first one. I was so excited. And then he signed my Superman picture that I had, and I looked down at it, and that was the first time I ever saw the name Bill Finger. That July was the first comic book convention ever held on the planet Earth in this Fleabag Hotel in downtown New York. There were 200 of us that showed up at Comic-Con. My mentor into the business was a man called Otto Binder. Otto was the driving creative force on the writing side of Captain Marvel in the 40s and 50s, and then went over to DC, where he co-created Supergirl, Brainiac, and so many other great things for Superman. As we went into this first Comic-Con in this Fleabag Hotel, my friend and I passed this sketchy bar, and this was about 9:30 in the morning. And as we walked by, we saw Otto Binder sitting in there with another guy. So the 2 13-year-old boys go, "Hi, Otto," and he says, "Michael, Bobby, hi, come on in." And we went into this bar. And we sat down with Otto and this other guy. And he said, "What are you boys drinking?" And honest to God, they would have served us anything in that moment. And as we're sitting there, Otto says, "Boys, how would you like to meet the creator of Batman?" We go, "Yeah." And he says, "Boys, meet Bill Finger." And that was the second time I had a chance to meet and talk to Bill Finger. So all I want to say is I am so proud, so 50 years later now, to be able to sit in front of you and relate my own conversations with Bill and how important he is to all of us, to comic book fandom, to comic books, and to pop culture around the world.
story a couple months ago in New York, and I have a really interesting little footnote to that. There was only one time in Bill's lifetime that his name appeared in the mainstream press. And it was in the New Yorker magazine, of all things, the esteemed New Yorker magazine, and it was a little talk of the town piece about that day in the bar. And Michael's not mentioned yet, because he wasn't Michael yet, but Bill and Otto they described exactly as you do. Did I send it to you? The article? I'll send it to you. It's this, whoever wants it, just email me. It's this great little piece about Bill and Otto at the bar that, you know, was the only time that his name was not in the New York Times until 1995, almost 20 years after he died. It's just unthinkable. It's unthinkable.
Tom, there at the end, you know a few things about him through a direct source and closer sources. Tell us what you've learned from Bob and Bill.
I'd like to say a little bit something about how he did the process of writing the strip. He wasn't just a writer, he was also one of the first people to grasp all of the life of the visual nature of comics. And what he would do is he would put directions down into his scripts about angle shots and props, and do incredible amount of research. That's partly why he was late with his scripts all the time. But one thing that he did, which is very interesting, I think, was Douglas Fairbanks was a hero to Siegel and Schuster and Bob Kane and Bill Finger and many kids of that generation, particularly those who were drawing superheroes. And he would put in his scripts photos of Douglas Fairbanks performing various acrobatic stunts that he was famous for, and that's how Batman's famous acrobatics came about. So Bill was not only responsible for writing these scripts, but he was also designing them visually. Another example of that is, as you were saying, the big prop stuff. Most people don't know this, but Orson Welles was a comic book fanatic and also Batman fanatic, and was heavily influenced by Batman and the German expressionist influence of Batman, the angle shots and the atmosphere and stuff. And he did a film called The Stranger in the late 40s about an escaped Nazi who came to, after the war, hid out in America and was a clock fanatic. And the last scene showed him fighting, actually not fighting, but hanging on this clock. He actually was impaled by two of these figures on this giant clock face. And this came right out of Bill Finger's story, The Clockmaker, in which Batman and Robin are hanging from the hands of a clock. Also, Safety Last. Of course, the famous Harold Lloyd film was also probably an influence on Bill here. So Bill was not just a writer, he was also a visual artist who inspired a lot of these visuals and the whole atmosphere of Batman, as well as all the Bat mythos that's been described.
You touched on something really important in there. It's not just all these incredible characters and gadgets and the city he created. Bill understood the potential of the comic book at a time when a lot of other people around him thought they were doing comic strips. It's like, we're going to take a bunch of guys. Look at the very first Superman story, but it's literally comic strips. He understood the medium, its potential, and the kind of story it could tell in a way that would affect the industry, and others would come to learn it over time. Anybody else in the room ever met Bill Finger? He's been gone for 40 years. I see one hand. You sir, you met Bill? Could you come up and tell us about it? We've got a share over there. Bill once upon a time.
Beg pardon?
You mentioned that you once spent an evening chatting with Bill.
Yeah, I was the newest kid on the block, about maybe 6 weeks out of the job as a reporter in a small town you've never heard of, or a small paper you have heard of even less. And I ended up in New York as a comic book writer, knowing nothing about New York, nothing about New York publishing. And comic books, well, I loved them as a kid, but I hadn't seen them in 10 years. And Bill Finger kind of suggested we go out and spend an evening together. He took this raw recruit and very kindly told me stuff about the business and about the craft that I had embarked on that I should know, but wasn't going to learn from anyone else. We had a long, pleasant, friendly evening. I think I got the subway back downtown at about 12 o'clock, and that leaves me with one regret. I got all caught up in the comic book world. I wish that I had sought out Bill to spend more time with him. And although I know it would have been impossible when I became the Batman editor, I wish I tried harder to get him credit. I now know that there were legalities that probably made that not going to happen. But I don't know, maybe apart from Cavalier and Clay, the great comic book narrative has yet to be written. You know, that novel, which will encapsulate the comic book experience. And central to that would be how the creative guys, some of them were mentioned here, did not get credit, and in some cases not very much money. And the archetype of that was Bill, a nice guy, extremely talented, as a couple of these guys mentioned. He was creating the art farm for, you know, like $5 a page. And he was one of the first that understood that a comic book page is a page. It is not a screen. It is not a proscenium. It has strictures, but it also has opportunities that had not existed in any art form up to that time. Those guys just were very casually creating a language, inventing an art form for bad money against deadlines. So I wish that I tried harder. I once did approach somebody in the legal department, and they said, if I get out of here, get lost. So I didn't spend much time with him, but I think that evening was valuable. It's one of those landmark events that I will never forget, and I think I better shut up now.
When Bill Finger is rewarded for the work that he did on Batman. But I think we all know that Batman wouldn't be Batman without Bill Finger. And he really should be considered a partner in creating Bill Batman. I hope that everybody here understands that, and understands the importance of Bill and the creation of Batman, along with Bob Kane. We can't overlook or ignore, but it's important to understand that enough time has gone by and that we can never quite reward him for the work that he did, even though it was incredibly significant, and that's a pity. But from my point of view, I just want everybody to know that it's very easy to see how important Bill Finger was to Batman.
That was Neil Adams, whose illustrations of Denny's story motivated me to learn to read to see why Batman was so much darker than I expected it to be. Lee, you played Catwoman in one of the lighter versions of Batman. And you've been dealing with fans of this more and more over the years. I see you doing a number of conventions over the last several years. Are Batman fans different from other fans that you encounter? Are they different from the time travel fanatics?
The age is slightly different. No, they are all, I really can say they are all enthusiastic. They loved the movie, they loved the series. Many people less and less now because there are more conventions and Julie has been coming to, Julie Newmar has been coming to conventions. And so they're beginning to realize that there were 2 cat women, actually 3, now 4, now almost 5. But they're always excited, they're always intrigued with stories. Can you tell me about the Riddler? Can you tell me about Penguin? You know, because I was lucky enough to, I was truly the luckiest of all the cat women, I think, because I really did get to work with all of them. Burgess, Caesar, Frank, just fabulous. And of course, working with Adam and Bert, and charming. I had a wonderful time working with them. But the fans, they are very, very loyal, and many of them come to me and say, oh, my babysitter or my grandmother or my aunt or my uncle sat me down and made me watch over and over and over that movie. And I said, oh, you poor thing. Oh, no, it was great. It was great. It's wonderful. I'm now an official babysitter of any number of But I'm just so proud to be here and to honor your family members. And Bill, my goodness, he sounds as though he was really quite a fellow. And I wish I had had the opportunity to meet him. And I'm proud of all of you here working together to get the story straight and to make it known around the world how important all of his work was to benefit of many people who still adore the Batman and the Batman legend. Thank you for letting me be a part of it too.
Mark with a K. How did the Bill Finger Awards come about? How long have you been doing the Bill Finger Awards? How long have they been going?
Oh, let's see. Have to ask Jerry C. I don't know. 2005. Thank you. Oddly enough, the very first person to ever suggest this award was not Jerry Robinson. It was on a panel, I think in this room, Arnold Drake, who was a friend of Bill's, got up at, some of you may remember a panel I did with Arnold Drake a long time ago, and he said you should have an award called the Finger, and he demonstrated what that looked like. For people who just have not gotten the recognition they deserve. And Arnold, of course, I think I can back his mind that he deserved one of those, and he did, we gave him one. But then Jerry Robinson suggested that, Genesis has, I think, been modest about his father. You know, it wasn't just that Jerry assisted Bob Kane. Jerry kind of was Bob Kane for a while there. The look and feel of Batman, the art style that everyone was trying to imitate was Jerry's. Bob Kane's art ability was non-existent, but what talent he had was kind of for funny animal comics. That's ideally what he wanted to do. And one day, as you know, a man named Vince Sullivan, who was the editor of Detective Comics, said, hey, why don't you come up with a costume character like Superman? Vince Sullivan was the editor of the initial Batman stories, another man who never met Bill Finger in his whole entire life. It's amazing, that's how Bill was in the background. Anyway, Jerry became the guy that I think Bob Kane was a little annoyed at times because nobody ever doubted Jerry Robinson. He was such a man of integrity. He was so nice and so humble that when he gave his version of history, people knew it. When he came to the convention, he said, you should have a Bill Finger Award. They went, yes, we absolutely should. And then he stuck me with running it.
They gave you the finger.
That's right. So it's one of the few things we can do that keeps Bill's name in front of people. We're presenting 3 of them on tomorrow night at the award ceremony, and Athena is going to come up there and help us present them, which I think makes them extra special. And Anyway, what else do I want to talk about? I met Bill Finger for like 5 minutes, like I said. I was up at the DC offices one day about 1973. There was this older gentleman walking around. And I knew he must be a professional of some sort, and I couldn't recognize him. And I finally grabbed a man. There was a man up at DC at that time who knew everything that ever had to be known about comics. His name was Nelson Bridwell. And I said, "Who's that?" He said, "That's Bill Finger." I went, "Oh my God." I ran to try to find him. I couldn't find him. I found him down in the lobby of the building. I went up to him and I said, "Mr. Finger, my name's Mark Evanier. I'm a writer and such, and I just want to thank you. I've been plagiarizing you for years, stealing ideas from you, and I'm the only one who will admit it to you." He laughed, and we talked about the subway system in New York for a while. The entire, I don't think we ever mentioned Batman. That was my entire 6 minutes or 5 minutes with Bill Finger, and I kind of staggered away going, "That's Bill Finger."
Athena, this is your first year to ever attend this, much less any Comic-Cons. Why have you not been involved? Was it not just this most wonderful thing to tell everybody, hey, my granddad was one of the co-creators of Batman when you were growing up?
Well, you would think it would be a great thing, but growing up, no, it wasn't. I shied away from talking about it as I got older because people basically just didn't believe me. It's different now with internet, media, and everything, people actually knowing about the true story behind it. So, you know, when Mark found me back in 2007, I was still in a caseplate and hiding from the whole thing. It was really hard for me to approach the subject. So, when he found me, he started bringing me out a little more. I got to meet Michael at the Dark Knight premiere, so I've been doing a little more activities with that. This being such an important year for Batman I felt the right time for me to come out and start representing more physically Bill's legacy, his contribution.
I have to tell you all about the Dark Knight premiere night.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Athena and Jerry Robinson and I were there that night. And figuring it was about time, I took Jerry and Athena and I walked them over, and my son David was with me, and I'm happy to report he had his camera out, so he documented this whole thing. And one by one, I introduced them to Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, Aaron Eckhart, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Danny DeVito, and in each case, I explained to them what her grandfather did, what his contribution was, what Jerry's contribution was, and in each of those cases, those individuals gave her and Jerry the biggest hug physically and emotionally, and thanked Jerry, thanked Athena for everything her grandfather did. It was an incredible, wonderful night for me, and as I'm happy to say, it was actually documented. And just to see everybody whose careers have been impacted by the works of Bill Finger and Jerry Robinson, and of course Bob Kane, that was just something wonderful to witness.
It was magical that night, definitely was.
Ben, you've grown up in an age of internet. Has it been easier for you when you tell people, hey, my great-granddad was a creator of Batman?
Well, at first, in kindergarten and preschool, people wouldn't believe me. And then I would say once, people would be on the internet, like in 3rd, 4th grade, they would look it up, but they were just kind of lazy. But then Mark's book came out, and I actually saw it in my library, and I told people again, I told them, and they looked it up, and now they actually believe me, and it's a lot easier to say that my great-grandfather is a co-creator of that.
Because no books ever have false information, right? So.
And in the afternoons all week, Athena will be sending copies of the book. You'll look at it, it's like, this is a children's book. This thing is incredibly well researched. And my Lord, all the notes and the pages in the back. And you get to talking about with this man and finding out the incredible amount of work he did. Mark, you have done so much to help people find out about Bill Finger. Tom, Mark has talked about Tom being a hero of this piece by getting Bob Kane to acknowledge what he did. There's a couple of remarks in the autobiography, which was written by Bob Kane and someone else, Tom Andre. There are some remarks very specific about Bill's importance in the look of the character, writing the stories. Of course, Bob Kane tells stories differently every single time. He doesn't draw Batman differently every single time, with the same face every time. But the stories vary, but there are some important recognitions. You go through piece by piece, and Bob Kane's own words sure make it sound like Bill was definitely the greater part of the creative force.
That's because they were Bill's words. What I did was Bob started to admit that he felt guilty and he wanted to put Bill's name on the strip, which I don't think he ever would have done, but at least he expressed that sentiment. And then he started talking about how Bill had created the costume and he'd been there right from the beginning, which was true, but he didn't say too much else. And then so I had read, of course, Steranko's famous History of Comics, which was the incredible interview with Bill Finger that we all learned about everything that he'd done. So I just started taking those quotes and sticking them in there. And I got as many as I could in there. And finally, Bob came and he said, "We've got too much stuff about Bill in here. Remember, I created Batman." So, so I had to back off. But I got a lot in there from that. And I think Bob really did feel badly about it, but I wish he'd felt a little bit more guilty about it.
But you do have an acknowledgement in there, a statement for whatever it's worth, that Bob wished he could go back and give Bill the Bible.
Yes, that's true. And unfortunately, when the Finger family wanted to try to put Bill's name on the Batman film, the first Batman film, they came to Bob and asked him to do that, but Bob backed away from it because he felt he would open a whole legal can of worms and lose a lot of money, so he backed away from that. But I think he really did feel badly about it after that time, but unfortunately, he did rectify it, and I think we all have a chance now to rectify that situation.
There's only so much we can do in 50 minutes. I wish we could go step by step, really laying out what the man did. How do you celebrate such an important individual? You think how many billions of dollars are generated from his creations, and he's not the creator who's even that well known and didn't have billions of dollars. I'm actually going to put a theme on the spot for a second. What kind of computer do you own?
I don't have one.
How long have you not had one?
Well, my computer died back in 2000.
They gave me the stop. This is computer faster.
I got it fixed briefly and it worked for about 2 months. That was this past January, and I still have a computer now. So I do everything on my phone.
So that's the other side. Of course, I want to end on a more positive note than that. Just everybody thank my panelists, especially celebrate having the entire the reason I sat way up here with them, because since she played one of his creations, by extension, she's part of the family too. Thank you all. We will be out in the hall afterwards. Yes, let's get pictures.